That's okay. All right, so trigonometry. Let's get rolling on this. You're being so excited. So let me give you a basic definition of trigonometry. It is the study of the relationships among angles. This is my symbol for angles. That's how my math teacher did it. It's a hook through the angle symbol, so that way I don't think it's the less than symbol. So that's how I do it. The study of relationships among angles and sides of right triangles. So with trig, you're only going to deal with right triangles. We are going to deal with triangles, any triangle, when we do what's called law of sines and cosines. But everything we're doing in trig is all related to a right triangle. So it's really cool. So again, just to go over this idea of a right triangle, here's right triangle ABC. You're going to be introduced to, I think you may have seen it last year, a new Greek symbol called theta. Looks like that. I'll draw it again up here. It's like an O with a hook through it. This is theta. This is lowercase theta, by the way. Not to be confused with, theta, kappa, mu, alpha, whatever sorority or fraternity you want to join. If they put theta there at this angle B, then that's the angle they're talking about. I'm at theta would be B. They're the same thing. If you're standing at theta, which is what you always want to tell yourself, and where am I standing? You're standing at the angle they give you, theta. These sides are in relationship to theta then. This side directly opposite it would be opposite of theta. This side, the other leg, would be the adjacent leg. And then the one that's always opposite the 90 degrees is called your hypotenuse. Now, what the mathematicians prior to me decided to do was create these ratios that occur from theta and the sides that are opposite, okay? And there are 6 trig ratios. You're probably more familiar with the first 3. The first 3 are sine, cosine, and tangent. That's what you see in your calculator, sine, cosine, tan. We use this little phrase to help us remember, SOHCAHTOA, okay? Miss Davis has a phrase that she uses. So sine of theta, because you always take the sine of an angle. You don't ever take the sine of a fraction. You take the sine of the angle. Is equivalent to your opposite. That's where the O came from, over hypotenuse. Cosine, abbreviated COS, is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. This is where Mr. Calloway has a joke that he hates math because it's got a lot of sin in it. You can laugh at him. I don't. I'm like, that's not a good one. Anyway, okay. So those are the 3 that are famous. You need to know these 3. What we call the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. Abbreviated CSC, we say cosecant. And cosecant is your hypotenuse over your opposite. It is literally the reciprocal to sine. The reciprocal to cosine is secant, abbreviated SEC. And that would be your hypotenuse over your adjacent. And then there's cotangent, abbreviated COT, cotangent. That is adjacent over opposite. Before we go on, I need you to understand something and get this clearly in your head. Your calculator only has sine, cosine, and tangent. It does not have these 3 on it. Do not tell me that that sine with the -1 and that cosine, those are not these. Those are not these. Well, then how would you find secant in your calculator? Very easily. you do the reciprocal of cosine. These are reciprocals. Reciprocals meaning flip fractions. That's all they are. So I want you to write this down. You are not going to need this till we do our next chapter, but at least you'll have this idea in your head. If I want to know how to find cosecant of, I don't know, 30 degrees, what I would do would be, I would say, okay, I would put in my calculator 1 divided by sine of 30 degrees, because they're reciprocals. You just reciprocate them. If I want to find secant, I would do 1 over cosine. If I want to do cotangent, that looks terrible. I would do 1 divided by tan. These are how you find the answers from your calculator, okay? And we'll get to that in a minute. So the biggest thing you need to know are these 6 trig ratios. Sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent, okay? They're just reciprocals, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right? So first problem on your homework tonight. The first question, questions 1, 2, and 3, and you're getting a worksheet, by the way, is going to say this. Let me actually have the right. Find the values of the 6 trig functions of theta. And I am actually going to do your homework questions tonight, even though you all are very blessed. And this homework isn't due till Wednesday. The other students have to do it tomorrow, even though they're not doing homework. They had to get it done in class very quickly. So I'm actually going to do question number 3 on the worksheet tonight. Thanks, Mrs. Seta. You're welcome. It looks like this. It has 3 square root 3 here and a 3 here and theta right here. And the directions will say, find the 6 trig functions of theta. So they want you to find the sine of theta, the cosine of theta, the tangent of theta, the secant, the cosecant, the tangent, all of those. So before you begin, though, you need to have 3 sides of the right triangle. And right now we only have 2. How do you find a third side?
A squared plus b squared.
Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And again, if you don't know what your C is always the hypotenuse. It's always opposite the 90 degrees. So either of these can be A or B. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to do 3 root 3, and then I'm going to square it. Plus 3 squared equals c squared. 3 root 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, and then 9 times 3 is 27. 3 squared is 9. 36. So then what's C, y'all? 6. You don't do plus or minus because we were talking about the side of a triangle. So this is 6. Now, before you even begin, here's another thing I do. Couldn't all these numbers reduce a 3, and a 6? What number can go into all of them? You might as well reduce right now. So 3 goes into 3 root 3. It would actually be 1 root 3. You don't have to put the 1, but I am. 3 divides into 3 once, and 3 divides into 6 2. This is actually the numbers we want to use instead. If you didn't know that and you wrote out your fraction, just make sure your fractions are reduced. That's all. Okay, so now I use SOHCAHTOA, and you write it like this. You are standing at theta. That's where you stand, not over here, not at the right angle, never at the right angle. Always at this one or this one. But here they've given us thetas right here. So I want the sine of theta. I want, if I'm standing at theta, the opposite and the hypotenuse. What would that be? What over what?
1 over 2.
That's what I want. And I want the cosine of theta. So now I'm standing at theta. I want the adjacent over the hypotenuse. What would that be? Adjacent over the hypotenuse. 2 over root 3 or root 3 over 2? Root 3. Has to be the adjacent. Over 2 is the hypotenuse. Then I want the tan. Tan is opposite over adjacent. So I would write 1 over root 3. Well, I don't like the way that looks. How do you write that correctly from the homework you did?
Root 3 over 3.
Root 3 over 3. Then, once you get those 3, the other 3 are really easy. You just have to remember which one comes first. Sine's reciprocal is cosecant, and then just flip that. 1 over 2, flip it to 2 over 1 or just 2. Cosine's is secant. Flip this, it would be 2 over root 3, which I rationalized to be what? 2 root 3 over 3. And then tangents is cotangent. I'm actually not going to flip that one. I'm going to flip that one because it would actually have the radical out of the denominator. So it's just radical 3. And there's your answer. That's what you'll have to do on question 1, 2, and 3 on homework tonight. And actually, I just did 3. Booyah. It's too much, sure. All right, then questions 4, 5, and 6 are going to do the following. And I'm actually going to do number 6 for you.
Yeah.
If the sine of b is 8 over 15, what is the cosine of b? 4, 5, and 6 are going to do stuff like this. If the tan of A is 1 over 2, what is the secant? You know, they're going to ask you those weird ones. You're like, well, oh, I know it. Man, I know the reciprocal to that, but I don't know cosine. Yes, you do. First thing you do is draw a triangle, y'all. Draw a right triangle. Put a right angle here, and then call this is B, so we'll call it angle B right there. Sine, again, is what over what?
Opposite over hypotenuse.
Right. So my opposite side would be 8. My hypotenuse would be 15 now. Normally, when I was doing this with the other class, I thought to myself, oh, this is a famous Pythagorean triple. Do you know what Pythagorean triples are? Like the most famous one is 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. So if I have a 3 and a 4, then I know, you know, this one's 5, that kind of thing. There is a famous one to the 8. There's an 8, 15, 17. Why is this one not 17? Anybody know why? It's not the highest, right? The highest has to be the hypotenuse. Okay? So, unfortunately, I do have to do Pythagorean theorem here. So, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 8 squared plus, I don't know, b equals 15 squared. B squared equals 225 minus 64 is 161. Take a square root. And 161 it can't reduce, so just leave it as 161. So leave this as the square root of 161. Okay? So now let's answer the question, because it's easy from now on. What is the cosine of B? Cosine is, again, whatever, if you're standing here, adjacent over hypotenuse. Done. That's it. Draw the triangle, do a Pythagorean theorem, and write your ratio. It's always the same thing. All right, and then the last 2 problems to show you tonight, and we're done. It's easy stuff. You got this.
Oh.
Find a side given an angle. And I am doing question 8 on your homework tonight. Again, this should all be familiar to you from Miss Davis last year. Okay. If you are given an angle, that's where you start. You always start at theta, or the angle that they give you. So I'm starting at 20 degrees. And I'm asking myself what relationship, because that's what trigonometry is, what's the relationship of the x and the 32? Is this an adjacent, an opposite, or a hypotenuse? This is an opposite. What's this one?
Hypotenuse.
Thinking of the word SOHCAHTOA, which one has opposite and hypotenuse? So, a ka, or a toa?
Sine.
Sine. So you would write the sine of 20 degrees. You always write sine of the angle equals your ratio. Opposite over hypotenuse, so x over 32. And then you can crisscross multiply, and you get x equals 32 goes in front, sine 20. You don't want to multiply the 32 and the 20. That's not right. It's 32 sine 20. Now, everybody in your calculator right now, okay? So I need to show you something. Right now, my calculator at the top says this word. If you have the newer ones, if you have the black and white, it doesn't say this. I'll show you where it does. Mine says what? Radian. I need it to say degree. So everybody go into mode, go down to like the fourth line, and you'll see radian and degree, arrow over, put it in degree, and you'll notice mine changes. Yours should too. And then you can quit out. Now you're going to type in 32 sine 20. And that's your answer, 10.9. When you're dealing with sides, I'd like you to go to 1 decimal. When they want you to find a side, go to at least 1 decimal, okay? By the way, somebody in the other class asked me, they're like, Ms. Seta, shouldn't we always have it in degree? Probably for you in this class right now, yes, until we get to more higher level radian ones. We will use radians though, but just keep it in degree. And if you're doing the SAT and ACT, I'd keep it in degree. And I would, if they give me a pi over 2 or whatever, which we'll get to what that means in a minute, I would just convert it to degrees and just use degrees the whole time. All right, last one, find an angle. Oh, you need to star this because this gets on my nerves. This is number 12. 13. I know, right? And I just did 4 of them for you because Lord knows we can't give homework tonight. God forbid we do anything. Please delete this from the little YouTube event here. Why? Because we're Metrolina. We can't make the kids, we just can't make the kids think.
It's like some college night thing.
Yeah.
It's too much.
It's just too much. It's too much. All right, so one more time again. Now they want you to find x and y of a triangle. We really only have to find one of them because you should know what all the angles of a triangle add up to. What are all the angles of a right triangle? What do they all add up to? They all add up to 180. I already have 90. Good job, Greg. So you could use y. Oh, I forgot another number. They have to have another number. I was going to say. There's a 7 here. Sorry. You would use y or x. I'm going to do y just to change it up on bet. Yes, Brian. Yeah, I forgot to write the 7. I'm sorry. It needed to be there. It was part of the problem. All right, so I'm going to find y. You could have found x first. I'm going to choose y. Again, if you're standing at the angle y, how are these two sides related? This is an adjacent. This one is a hypotenuse. So it's cosine of y degrees equals the adjacent 7 over the hypotenuse 15.3. Here's the biggest thing. To find an angle, you have to use something special in your calculator. You use the inverse buttons. Those are the only things that help you find angles. That's all they do. And you write it like this. I would inverse cosine the ratio 15.3. 7 to 15.3. So inverse cosine, 7 divided by 15.3. And again, we're already in degrees, so that's good. And I would round that to the nearest degree. What's 62.7 round to the nearest degree? Round it to 63 degrees. So that way we can find x. What would x then be? If this is 90 and this is 63, and then subtract from 180 and you get 27 degrees. Guys, this is called inverse cosine, inverse sine, and inverse tan. All they do is help you find an angle. That's all they can do. That's all they do. But other names for them, and I would like you to write this down. This is the last thing, because if you see this on ACTs or SATs, inverse cosine is also known as arc cosine. ARCCOS, that's what they write. Inverse sine is known as arc sine, and inverse tan is known as arctan. Just know that. Again, keep that in your file in your head. But this is it. That's trig part 1. It should be very basic tonight. So your homework will be to do all the way up to question 13. And you've already done, you can even do the ones that I did, you can just say, oh, it's in my notes, it's in my notes. This is not due till Wednesday when I see you.
Yeah, if I do this tonight, I get in trouble. Yeah, big.
Have your dad call me, I'm sure.
Why is it illegal to do homework today?
It's only illegal for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, but seniors can actually do it, so.
Do what? But do what? Yeah, I don't do that.
I know, you don't do it to begin with, so no worries.